So when I show you these logos, most of you have probably seen them before. These are the most known names in VR, and they have all made headsets that are all very popular and loved. Some more than others, but they all have their own certain place in the whole industry. However, when I show you this logo, most of you probably don't know who they are, and I can't blame you too much for that. This is Pimax, a VR company that doesn't quite get picked up as much as the others, because frankly, I didn't really know much about them either. Sure, I've known their existence, but I've never really known what headsets they have, and that got me curious on why they're not as known as the rest. So I decided to look more into them, and it surprised to me that they have actually made 14 different types of headsets. Meta has only made 10, so I'm gonna look at each headset individually and see what makes Pimax so different from the others, and what do they do so differently that makes it so they don't get picked up as much as the rest. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to go straight from the beginning. So let's see how their first headset was like, and that headset happens to be this one. This is the Pimax 4K, and I will say the specs for this headset were different from what the competition was giving at the time. So this headset was released on December 31st, 2016. Its resolution per eye was 1920 by 2160 and was priced at $375, which that seems pretty cheap. However, that's just for the headset itself, because the headset itself couldn't do full room tracking by itself. It needed base stations and controllers. And if you wanted all that would then have to be $925 for everything. And I had a 110 degrees field of view with a 60 Hz refresh rate. And if you don't really know what hertz are, just think of it as frames per second. And it weighed 499 grams. So Pimax has been in the VR game for a good while, and they really wanted to separate themselves from the competition. So they decided they wanted to have a huge resolution. And to show you how big it is, this diagram shows the resolutions of different headsets. You can see that the Vive and Rift at the time would be 1080 by 1200 resolution per eye. You can see that in the square depicted in orange, while the Pimax is in green. So you can see the difference in resolution is huge. The Pimax even has a better resolution than the Quest 2. So yeah, it was not messing around. But with that huge resolution does come with some drawbacks, because it was only in 60 Hz while the competition was at 90 Hz. So that just made games look more framey than they had to be, which can be really sickening to people. And just having a smoother experience altogether will cause people to get less sick. And there's also a feature that this headset didn't have that the competition did. This headset had no manual IPD adjustment. So if you didn't like where the lenses were, you were kind of stuck with it. Yeah, sure, you can change it in the software, but that's just not as good. And it was a little more expensive than the competition. Well, the HTC was about $800, so it's not too bad. But also something that was really good in this headset were the headphones that came with it. They were really big, they went around your whole ear and were nice and padded. They felt really comfortable and gave some pretty good sound with it. So that was just a nice added bonus. But I did say the headset itself was $375, which that sounds good, but it caused limitations because you needed to buy third-party cameras or controllers for this thing to really work. Or you could just grab HTCs, which worked really well too. Because if you didn't, this headset would only let you have 3 degrees of freedom. So you'd only be able to turn your head and not your body. So I could see a lot of people being upset that the headset can't do that unless you have those things. But you know, maybe you don't want to play games with that, because there's one thing that this headset does great with, and that is watching TV shows or movies. Because the resolution was so good, this was the best headset to watch movies in VR. And since the lower refresh rate didn't matter too much, since movies and TV shows are usually filmed in 24 frames, and you wouldn't really need the cameras or controllers for this either. So it is nice to have that certain option, but there's a lot of people who probably really wanted to play games on this thing and were pretty upset when they realized they needed more stuff to do that. So it was nice a headset trying to be different than the rest, but it seems like that really didn't work for them in the long run, which is probably why this headset went under the radar. But this wouldn't stop Pimax from trying again, because they knew if they keep trying again, they will find success at some point. The next headset I'm going to talk about is actually really strange, because it was never released to consumers, and here it is. This is the Pimax 8K, and I gotta say, this one is pretty weird. This headset was first shown on November 7th, 2017, and its per eye resolution was 3840 by 2160. And since this was never given to the public, there was no official pricing. It also had a 200 degrees FOV and 80 Hz refresh rate. And I have no idea how much this weighed. My guess would be somewhere around 750 grams. It was actually kind of hard getting information for this headset. Since it was never really released, I couldn't get too much out of it. This headset was more of a test to see how 8K can be implemented into a headset, even though the headset actually wouldn't be in 8K. Even though the resolution I said at the beginning was correct, it couldn't actually put that out many pixels. And the resolution was more like 2560 by 1440 per eye. And then they'd take that and then they'd upscale it to the resolution. So even though it was was labeled as 8K, it actually really couldn't do it. This headset was supposed to come out, but it never did. The last time we saw it was in January of 2019, and after that, they never talked about it again. There were some people who were able to get their hands on it, but the people who do were just given it, mainly to show their audience on what Pimax is doing, to get the word out. And that's all I really have about this headset. We really don't know too much about this headset. When I was gathering information about this headset, some places didn't even acknowledge its existence. But that does make sense since it was never released. But this headset would be important because of what happens next. It wouldn't take them too long to make their next headset, which so happens to be this one. Now this is a headset that's really recognizable. This is the Pimax 5K Plus. And if you're wondering, has there ever been a Pimax 5K? No, they just never made one. The 5K Plus has some really interesting specs. It came out November 29th, 2018, and its per eye resolution was 200/560 by 1440. And for just the headset, it was $700. But if you wanted the controllers and cameras as well, then they would pretty much be $1,250. So that's a pretty big price jump, but there's a big reason for that. And that's because the FOV on this headset was 200 degrees. So yeah, that is huge. And the hertz got bumped up too, all the way up to 144 hertz, and it also weighed 514 grams, which is actually pretty light for its size. So yeah, you could pretty much guess that the FOV was this headset's main selling point. And that's mainly what Pimax is known for having insanely huge FOV, because the average around this time and today was about like 110. So that binocular effect that other headsets have is completely eradicated with this, which that just then increased the immersion of VR games. And unlike the other headset, this headset actually does have a manual IPD adjustment. So it's really nice to see them finally implement a basic feature, and it's something that every headset should have, to be honest. And the hertz was a huge improvement, more than doubling what it had last time. So gameplay overall just felt really smooth. And this was pretty much a premium experience, but that did come with a price. Since Pimax only really makes PC headsets, you need to pay the $1,250 and have a good computer as well, which is something that a lot of people are just not wanting to do. Sure, high-end products are great and you can really push the boundaries of what we can do, but most people are just not gonna buy it. But hey, it's still nice to see a company doing something completely different and seeing what works. Because if they wanted to, they could have just played it safe. Which yeah, that could have worked for them, but that makes them not stick out as much. So yeah, this headset was pretty good, but it had a few little drawbacks. But there is one thing I can say, in that this headset looks pretty cool. I'd probably have to say it's one of the coolest looking. But this wasn't the only headset they released that year. And actually, the other headset was released on the exact same day as this one. This is the Pimax 5K XR. This is pretty much the brother of the 5K Plus. And like I said, it came out the same day, November 29th, 2018, and the resolution was the exact same as well. But the headset by itself costed $900, and if you wanted the cameras and controllers, that'd be $1,450. And it also has the same 200 degrees FOV, but the hertz was smaller, only being 82, and it weighed pretty much the exact same as the other one. So this seems a little bit confusing. So if it's pretty much the same, but the hertz are worse, why does it cost more? Well, that's because I'm leaving one little thing, and that little thing is that this headset is using an OLED display, while the last two were only using an LCD. Alright then, so then what's the difference? Well, the main difference is that the OLED display has much blacker blacks, and overall has more contrasting colors with it. You can see here how the displays are different from each other. The LCD screen's colors just seem a little more blended together, while the OLED display has a much blacker black, which makes the other colors stand out from each other. Because you can see the LCD black is almost like a gray, and there are some people who really care about that. But I guess having this OLED screen came with a cost, which that was being the hertz only being 82. So then the game looks more choppy than usual. And you may think that trade-off is not really that worth it, and I think I'd agree with you. Maybe if the price was the exact same as the other one, then I'd get it, but that's just not true. Because personally, I think I'd rather go with the 5K Plus than the XR. But it is nice to see choices. If you want an OLED display, get this one. If you don't, get the other. Which I feel like VR just kind of lacks at doing sometimes. But it does feel like it's gotten recently better. And they would continue this trend with their next batch of headsets. And this being one of them. This is the Pimax 8K Plus. It looks very familiar, I know, but trust me, it's different. It was released February 18th, 2019, and its per eye resolution was insane. It was 3,840 by 2,160, and the headset by itself costed $900, and if you wanted the controllers and base stations, that would be $1,450, with a 200 degrees FOV, and it had 110 hertz, and it weighs 750 grams. Alright, so this headset is actually now an 8K, right? Well, actually, it is not, because it does the exact same thing as the 8K does. where it's actually at a lower resolution then upscales that to make it seem like it's higher. So in a way, it's kind of like you have a 1080p monitor, but you have the resolution set to 720p. So then that 720p will go up to fit that 1080p, but it actually isn't in 1080p. So pretty much it's kind of cheating with the name. And this headset doesn't have an OLED display. They have something that's called a CLPL display, which I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what the difference is between that and an LCD. So it's pretty much just an LCD display, which if that makes the price go down, then I understand why they did it. And besides those things, it's really not too different from the previous headset, except for one thing though. This headset and onward would be able to have add-ons put into it. So then you'd be able to put in eye tracking, face tracking, and even have it so you can have inside-out tracking so you don't need the cameras. But since these are add-ons, they come separately. And just for one of these is gonna cost you like a couple $100. It doesn't make sense why they did this though, because if all that stuff was put into the headset, it'd be a lot more pricey. So this headset was good, it's just its lack of ability to actually put out 8K really was a detriment to it. However, it did make it cheaper, so it was nice having a cheaper option. But the other option that came out the same time as this headset was just the more powerful of the two, which would be this one right here. This is the Pimax 8KX. And this headset is really similar to the one I just covered because it would come out the exact same day, have the exact same resolution, but at the time, this would be their most expensive headset, with only the headset by itself costing $1,300. And if you wanted controllers and base stations, it would then be $1,850. And don't worry, I'll explain why it's so expensive. Had 120 degrees FOV, but the hertz would actually be a little smaller, only being at 90. And it would be 850 grams, also being their most heaviest headset at this time as well. So what made it so expensive this time? Was it because it has an OLED display? Nope, it has a CLPL display, so pretty much LCD. Was eye and face tracking built into it? Nope. It's super high priced because it doesn't upscale the resolution. It actually goes up to what it says. So congratulations, it's like a 1080p monitor going up to 1080p. So it actually does what it's advertised. So if we go back to this graph, you can see that the resolution is way over there and just completely blows everything out of the water. Besides the Vario and the Apple Vision Pro, but those wouldn't come out until way later. And this is what Pimax is all about. Super high resolution with a super high FOV. And that is just something else that no other VR company is doing, which in ways it's kind of like a double-edged sword. And one more thing about this headset. I did say it was 90 Hz, but it is possible for it to get upscaled to 115 Hz. So you can do 115 Hz, however that comes with a catch. Your resolution would have to be decreased in some way. And for most people, that trade-off is not worth it, so most people just stuck with 90 Hz. And you could probably tell not many people bought this headset, not because it was bad, but the pricing was just abysmal. And not to mention, with that high resolution, you needed the best computer possible. Not just a good, but really the highest you could possibly get. But you know what? That's alright, because that's just what Pimax is. Just pushing the boundaries of VR, just making really powerful high-end headsets. Which, once again, it's like a double-edged sword. Because the prices would just be too high. So they decided to change that with their next headset. This is the Pimax Artisan. One of their lower-end headsets, but it's still pretty high. The Artisan would come out January 10th, 2020, and its resolution per eye would be 1700 by 1440, which that is drastically smaller than the previous ones we've just talked about. And the headset itself would be $450. And if you wanted base stations and controllers with it, it'd be $950. It would also have a 170 degrees FOV with a 120 Hz, and it weighed 514 grams. So it was about time that they finally made something lower end, because the main purpose of this headset was to compete with the Valve Index, which came out a year prior, and they would be quite similar to each other, with the Valve Index only costing $50 more, and the resolutions were similar too, with the Index's resolution per eye would be 1440 by 1600, so it'd just be a little smaller, but you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. But the Valve Index did have higher hertz, being able to go up to 144. That is better, but not really too noticeable. But the main thing is the Valve Index's FOV would only go up to 130, which that's pretty big, don't get me wrong, but it's not the Artisan. But even after all that I've said, the Artisan sold a lot less than the Index, which it kind of makes sense because Valve is very loved and well known. And I personally would trust Valve more than Pimax, and the Valve Index had a lot more marketing than the Artisan. So making a headset that's lower than $1,000 was good, it's just the Valve Index overshadowed it so much. But I can at least appreciate the attempt. I guess people just wanted better stuff. This next headset is going to sound really familiar, but trust me, this one's different. This is the Pimax 5K Super. Very similar to the old 5Ks, but it's got one big difference. The The 5K Super was released on November 30th, 2020, and its resolution per eye was 2560 by 1440. The headset by itself costed $750, and with base stations controllers that'd be $1,300. With a 200 degrees FOV, and this is what separates this 5K from the others. This one has 180 Hz on it. There is something I'm leaving out, but I'll get to that in a bit. It would also weigh 750 grams. So this headset is really similar to the old 5Ks, with the resolution and FOV being the exact same. But since it's so similar, it feels like this should cost less. So I already told you the main gimmick of this headset, that being the 180 Hz, which I don't know if there's any other headsets that even go that high, at least at the consumer level. So games are really smooth, but that did come with a cost. So if you were running at 180 Hz, the FOV would have to get decreased. You can see here that if the headset is at 90 Hz or 120 Hz, it can do 200 degrees FOV no problem. But the more Hz you go, the lower the FOV becomes. So if you were to go to 180 Hz, that would only leave you with 150 degrees FOV, which that's still a really huge FOV, but it's not really what's advertised. They should have really specified that it could only do one or the other, because if I bought this, I'd be pretty upset that I can't do both at the same time. But other than that, it was still pretty similar to the other 5Ks. And also this headset wouldn't have an OLED display, which that kind of sucks, but it's not so bad. But here's something interesting. On March 9th, 2022, Pimax would finally make their own controllers, and they would specifically be made for the Pimax 5K Super and the 5K Super's predecessors. And these controllers are very interesting. It's almost as if the old HTC Vive controllers and the Valve Index controllers came together to form this. And I've heard mixed things about these controllers. I've heard some people say that the tracking is really good on them, and they like the hand strap that the Valve Index has, but it has a very big, weird, awkward ring around it. And also it has a trackpad, which a lot of people, and including myself, would rather just have an analog stick. And the last thing, this thing has a home button and one more button on it. Most controllers have an A button and B button, but this one just has one button. They just seem they have more bad qualities than good qualities. And I think the majority of people would rather just have the Valve Index controllers than these. I suppose having more options isn't so bad though. But back to the headset itself, I just really don't understand why you'd want to get this headset. It just seems like it was put in a really awkward space. Because personally, I think I'd try to get one of the other two 5Ks instead of this one, because it would probably be cheaper because it's older. And this would be the last 5K that they'd make, so then that would be the end of the 5K series. I should also mention that the 8K series is done as well. So if those two are gone, then what would be next? It wouldn't take them long to make up something new. And this one has a pretty cool name. This is the Pimax Crystal. This one actually has a lot going for it. It came out May 23rd, 2023, and its resolution per eye is 2880 by 2880. And for the first time, this one doesn't actually need base stations for it, and you need controllers with this one, so then this is just going to be $1,600 with a 130 degrees FOV, so they're actually cutting back on the FOV on this one, and it has 120 Hz, and it weighs 845 grams, so a little heavier than most headsets. So Pimax would do a lot of new stuff with this headset. So as I already said, this headset does not need any base stations, because there's cameras on all four corners of the headset, so you can do in and out tracking. But if you want to use base stations to track this, they'll still let you do it, so that's nice. So now you don't need to set up base stations all around your room, and all you need is the headset and controllers. And yes, that's all you need, because this is also a standalone headset, and that would be a first for Pimax. But if you do want to plug it into a PC, you still can. And this headset came with its own unique controllers as well, and they look super similar to the Rift S's controllers. The Pimax's controllers on the left and the Rift S's on the right. So if you really blurred everything and squint your eyes, you really couldn't tell the difference between them. But the controller is pretty good. And if you don't like them, then you could just get a Valve Indexes if you really wanted to. And here's something crazy that I just figured out. This headset has automatic IPD adjustment. So when you put the headset on, the lenses will actually move by themselves and adjust to your exact IPD. So now you don't have to do trial and error with the IPD, it just does it itself. So that's pretty cool. But it gets better, because this headset actually has built-in eye tracking as well. So then people in games will be able to see your eye expression, you blinking and looking around. And speaking about the eyes and what you're looking at, the Pimax Crystal has different lenses. They use what's called aspheric lenses, not to be confused with pancake lenses, because they are different. These lenses are now smaller and thinner, so then the headset can be smaller too. But what's different between the pancake lenses and the aspheric lenses is that the aspheric lenses have a little bump in the middle. They're made like this to reduce distortion and control the light levels and how it enters your eye, just to make a more clearer experience overall. And also something unique is that it's not using an LCD or an OLED display, it's using its own unique display. They use their own QLED display. It's this weird mixture between an LCD and an OLED. It tries to act like an OLED, where the blackers are more black and the colors are more contrasting. However, the limit with an OLED is that it can only get up to 90 Hz refresh rate, but the QLED actually gets up to 120 Hz. They also said that the QLED display is also better for eye tracking, but I'm unable to confirm if that's true or not. So the Pimax Crystal really does feel like a real upgrade to everything else. And in my opinion, I still think this is one of their best headsets. Yeah, $1,600 price tag is pretty high, but I think you get what you pay for. The only issue is that you still need a PC just to use it. But overall, I think this is a pretty well-rounded headset. It is nice to finally see something that is so different from everything else that I've covered. And this next headset I'm going to talk about is the most unique out of all of them. And yeah, it looks really weird, but there's a big reason for that. This is the Pimax Portal. I'm actually pretty interested to talk about this one. So the Portal came out October 29th, 2023, and its resolution per eye was 1920 by 2160. It would cost $450. It would have a 100 degrees FOV with 144 Hz, and it weighed a really small 367 grams. It would be their lightest headset that they've ever made. So then why does this headset look so different from all the rest that I've covered? Because this isn't just your ordinary VR headset. Because the VR aspect of this headset, it's only its second feature. Because the main focus on this headset is to be a competitor with the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck. That's right, it's not just a VR device, but also a handheld device, which is actually something really unique and something that I thought would make a bigger splash in the market, to be honest. So then it's like a normal Nintendo Switch with the controllers on the side, and then if you want to play on VR mode, you can take the controllers off, and then they just become VR controllers. And then you attach the screen onto the VR part, and it's just like a normal VR headset. And they also have a cheaper version that doesn't have the AR parts in it, so that's pretty nice. Which $450 for this actually sounds pretty good. And this is something that I actually really would like to try out someday. And there's also a third version of this headset as well, because instead of using an LCD screen, it uses a QLED display instead. However, that does up the price of it to $600. So if you don't want to spend that much, you can get the other one. Because this version of the headset is technically its own separate headset. I'm just putting them together here just because the only difference is that one's an LCD and one's a QLED. Also, the price is different, but I think they're similar enough just to put together. So I was really surprised when I figured out that this headset existed. Just this hybrid between VR and handheld is something that we haven't really seen yet. And I wonder if Nintendo's next console will have something similar like this. The Pimax Portal is just so unique and I wish more people knew about it. But I guess that is the purpose of this video after all. For the next headset, they go back to the Crystal, and they would make a cheaper version of it. And so they would come up with this. This is the Pimax Crystal Lite. It's really similar to the original Crystal, but it has a few key differences. The Crystal Lite would come out May 13th, 2024, and its resolution per eye was 2880 by 2880, so the same as the original Crystal. And the headset by itself would be $800, and with the controllers with that, it'd be $900. It would have a 115 degrees FOV, so a little smaller than the original Crystal, and it has 120 Hz, and it would weigh 815 grams. So the Crystal Lite would be very similar to the original, but would have a few things taken away. First off, you couldn't use this as a standalone headset. Even though you don't need base stations, you still need a PC to run it. So it acts the same way as the Rift S does. But because of that, it was able to become lighter. Because on the original Crystal, it had a battery for standalone VR. Since this one's strictly PC, it didn't need that battery, so now it's lighter. Also, its FOV has been decreased by 15 degrees. I'm not actually sure what the purpose of this was, but I guess it saved on money. And the other thing that they removed from this headset was the eye tracking. So if you didn't really use social games, then you didn't really need eye tracking anyways. And to also cut down on more costs, they also decided to get rid of the auto IPD adjustment, which I think is fine, and I don't think too many people would get upset about that. You're still able to do it manually, so I don't think too many people care. And you don't have to get the controllers for this one. If you just want the headset by itself, then that's fine, because you could get the one with the crystals, the swords, or the index. You could whatever you want. It is nice having controllers be optional. There are a decent amount of headsets where that's just not an option, and always having more options is a good idea. So this headset with the controllers being $900 is actually pretty good. You may lose a couple of cool features, but overall this I'd say is worth it. If you have a PC, that is. Which I'd say that's the main blunder of this headset, but it kind of makes sense. It has the same resolution and hertz as the other Crystal, so you can't be too mad at that. And now we only have 2 more headsets to go over. However, there's something that you guys should know. These next headsets that I'm going to talk about actually aren't officially released yet. So there's some details that we still don't fully have. So I'm probably going to go over these pretty quickly. But before I talk about them, if you've gotten this far and if you really enjoyed this video, I would suggest subscribing to the channel. The growth these last few months have been insane, and I'm so grateful for all of this. My goal is to get 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and if you want to help me reach this goal, well, you know what to do. So the first unreleased headset I'm going to talk about is going to be a different version of the Crystal, one that's even better than the original Crystal. Well, maybe not. This is the Pimax Crystal Super. This headset is supposed to come out later this year. So as I said, this headset is unreleased, and its resolution per eye would be 3840 by 3840. And because of the increase in resolution, this headset will now be $1,800. This headset's FOV would be 130 degrees. It would also have 120 Hz, and the weight of this headset is actually unknown. So even though this headset's supposed to be a better version than the original Crystal, they took one thing that actually surprises me. Even though the resolution is much higher and that'll make for a clearer experience, they decided to take away the standalone feature. So now you have to have a PC to run it. So why would a better product get rid of such a good feature? In ways, this Super almost seems like a downgrade, because I don't think that resolution increase is enough. And it also costing more, I think more people would just want to go with the original Crystal. But I guess we're just gonna have to see when this one comes out. Who knows, maybe there's just something here that I'm just not seeing. And the second unreleased headset and final headset that I need to talk about is this one. This is the Pimax Reality 12K. And this headset's history is actually kind of weird. So yeah, this headset is unreleased, and the resolution of this headset is also unknown. I could make an educated guess on what it is based on the name, but I'm not gonna make assumptions. And it's going to be $2,400. So yeah, really expensive. And it's gonna have a 200 degrees FOV with an astounding 200 Hz, which I don't think any consumer headset right now even goes that high. And the weight of this headset is unknown. So I'll say why the headset's history is actually pretty interesting, because this headset was revealed all the way back in October of 2021. And this headset was supposed to be released late 2022. But even today, it still just isn't released, and they keep pushing it back over and over again. And we still actually don't have an official release date, but there is a slight chance this headset will come out in early 2025. But don't get your hopes up too much. So yeah, this resolution of this headset is going to be insane. There's also a chance it might be even bigger than the Apple Vision Pro. I mean, now that I think about it more, it's definitely going to be higher. But we know how the Apple Vision Pro turned out. Just way too expensive, and I think this headset's going to as well. But this headset is going to be a standalone headset, so then you don't need a PC if you don't want to. But if you want to plug one in, you still can. And there's a high chance that the controllers that come with this headset are going to be the ones with the original Crystal. It just makes sense. And you know what? This headset actually kind of sums up the company really well. Just really trying to push a really high-end product and just see what they could get away with. Trying to have the highest this, highest that, stuff that no other VR company is doing right now. But as we've seen of the majority of their headsets, they're all just so pricey, which is the main thing that's holding back VR right now. Because how I envision the future of VR doesn't have a PC attached to it, which they are working on it, but I feel like they should have done it sooner. Maybe if they played it more safe and made cheaper headsets, then they'd be more in the mainstream. Sure, they're not as known as Meta, HTC, or Valve, but maybe they don't want to be in the mainstream. Maybe they just want to be different. They just want to carve their own path to see what works. And that's something I think we all can relate to.